will give the ball to McClendon. He leaps. Oh! He doesn't get in. He fumbled the football. Carolina holds. The game is over. And Carolina has won the game.
With 5 seconds, he's going to throw it. Howard leaps. He has it. Touchdown. Carolina back from the dead to tie the game with 2 seconds to go. There is a flag down, but holy smokes.
2 and 4 in overtime games. Carolina 1 and 3. Here from under center. Give off to Greg Little. Little pulls away. Little is going to score. Carolina wins.
Snap back, spot down. The kick is cleanly away. It is good!
And it's
with
yes,
a 54-yard field goal. And how about them Tar Heels? They do it!
Possible win. Snap, spot, kick away, high enough, long enough. It's good! It's good! Carolina has won the game on a 42-yard field goal by freshman Hunter Burns.
In his end zone. The punt, very high. Switzer will have room to return it. He fields it at the 40. Coming near side, Switzer at the 50. Switzer, 45, cuts back at the 40. 35, breaks a tackle at the 30. Still on his feet. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Ryan Switzer for 6. He is doing his best Giovanni Bernard impression. Ryan Switzer again. Bernard fields it at the 26. Heading to the far side. Gio at the 35. Gio, he's at the 50. No, he's not. Yes, he is. Gio is going to take it for a touchdown. Are you kidding me?
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Heel Tough Blog Podcast. It's your host, Anthony Pagnotta, with you guys as always. And tonight, it is officially time to turn our attention to the team on the field. That's right. We have talked to you guys about ACC Media Days, all the offseason stuff. We've been taking you through all of that. But tonight is when we shift our attention into full preseason mode. And it makes sense because the team does report tomorrow. Officially, they arrived today to where they will stay for camp, which is on campus. They stay together, of course, and tomorrow evening is when they will have their first practice. Don't know. I'm not assuming that's what they're going to be doing. Remember, Mac Brown has had them practicing in the morning for the better part of the last few years, but tomorrow, at least, it's going to be an evening practice for the guys as they get welcomed back. So going to be a lot of fun. And one of the main things that we're going to be watching here during camp is going to be the quarterback position. And so tonight, we're going to start our position previews. And again, it's going to be a little bit different than how we do it on the website. First of all, you get the opinions of both of us instead of just one of us in terms of what happens. And really with the position previews online, I don't really dive into a lot of opinion. It's more of just what to look for potentially this season, really a breakdown of the players that are in that room. And then you get the projected depth chart of how I think things will ultimately end up working out. So tonight will be interesting because you'll get to hear our opinions on both sides of what we think. And this is maybe the most interesting group that Carolina has right now. There's a lot of things going on the offensive line. There's a lot to be, figured out with the defensive line. Special teams is an incredibly interesting group. And then there's depth questions at areas like linebacker and running back. But this is the room right now, the quarterback room. I think if it wasn't interesting enough when we had Phil Steele on and he said that it's a 3-quarterback battle, it got even more interesting with what we talked about on the last edition of the podcast, which was that Carolina at ACC Media Days pretty much had no clue what was going on with their quarterback race. So Mac Brown goes on 99.9 The Fan, says it's a 2-quarterback race with Jacoby Criswell having to come in and learn. And there's an outside chance that he could be the guy. Well, when the media was asking Max Johnson about it, he was acting as if it was a 3-quarterback race, saying that he was surprised because when they brought in Jacoby Criswell, he was told that he was just there for depth. And then the other players, it kind of varied. You know, Kamen Rucker, when he spoke to us on WFNZ, really seemed to indicate that it was a 3-quarterback race. And, you know, Connor Harrell, when talking to 99.9 The Fan, he said it was him and Max Johnson, basically. So very confusing where the quarterback race stands. And I think, you know, look, is it the most interesting position on the team right now? Because I think there is certainly a case for that to be true because, one, it's the most important position. And two, I mean, we have no idea where it stands even going in. At least we would have liked to know for sure it's a 3-quarterback race or a 2-quarterback race.
Yeah, look, you said it's one of the things that we're going to watch in camp. It's the main thing you should watch. They have questions in the trenches. Yes, that's important. But what happens at quarterback not just impacts this season, it really impacts the future of the program because depending on if they get it right or not will determine how long Mac Brown stays on your sidelines. The good news is this is his 3rd quarterback battle he's had to go through during his time at Chapel Hill. They got it right in previously with Sam Howell being the quarterback and Drake May being the quarterback. The thing that made those quarterback battles easier, though, was you had a NFL caliber guy that emerged as your starting quarterback. I don't think no matter who wins this quarterback battle, I don't think they have NFL potential. Maybe Max Johnson with his ability to protect the football. But outside of that, I don't think Connor Harrell is an NFL quarterback, let alone Jacoby Criswell. And so I think that's what's going to make it tougher. I don't think there will be as clear separation as you got in the previous 2 battles. So it's going to be interesting. And as we learned last week with various different Tar Heels talking at ACC Media Day, there's not a clear picture of what's going on as they go into their first official practice tomorrow, which should make us even more nervous about how this all shakes up and shakes out. I thought going in, we would start 2 quarterbacks at the opener. That seems more and more likely that when Carolina takes the field against Minnesota, they'll play 2 quarterbacks in that ball game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way really around it at this point. Because especially if it is a 3-quarterback battle, I just don't think you're going to have enough reps to be able to actually figure out one guy that's going to start unless somebody really just stands out that much. In terms of the NFL quarterback stuff, I completely disagree with you. To me, Max Johnson there's no hope. He's not a guy that's going to make the NFL ranks. The arm isn't strong enough. He's a guy that, you know, just from watching him in the spring game, utilizes a lot of short and intermediate stuff and can't really drive the ball down the field. Where I think Connor Harrell, you know, we saw the arm strength that's there. I think for him, the biggest thing is going to be what does he look like behind a good offensive line? And then Jacoby Criswell, you can never question the arm strength with him. I mean, we saw him when he was at Carolina air it out a few times. I mean, this dude, they've said for years, I mean, even when he was in the room with both Sam Howell and Drake May, he had the strongest arm of the group. So for me, I think one of those guys could end up being the type of quarterback that you need. Now, don't get it wrong. I don't think that they're going to be Drake or Sam. I can't see that. I think they would be really solid starting quarterbacks, guys that, you know, especially like, you know, for Connor Harrell, if he stays another year, I believe Jacoby Criswell, 2 years of eligibility too. Could I see them end up being 3rd team all ACC type guys next year? Yeah, probably. I think that's probably the height of what they would do at the college level, but they would definitely be good enough to, in my opinion, win you 8 games this year. And I think right now that's kind of all that you're hoping for. But again, getting to that point of where you actually are figuring that stuff out it seems like it's an arduous task at this point. I guess as we go in, here's my question right now. What do you think this quarterback battle actually is? Do you think it's a two-man race, or do you think it's a three-man race, since we can't really get a clear answer? And at this point, I mean, you have to really wonder, are these answers that are being given in these radio interviews and press conferences, are they truthful, or are they really just trying to mislead people to try to keep everyone in college football on their feet?
Yeah, I think it's at its heart, it's a two quarterback battle, because Max Johnson said he was surprised when he heard it was a three quarterback race, and then we mentioned what Connor Harrell echoed as well. I think for Mac Brown, it's some sort of gamesmanship, if you will, which is just kind of odd, because I think you'd much rather invoke confidence into the two guys competing for the job, as opposed to maybe them being a little bit more nervous about there being another man in the race. But I think the fact that they were there for the spring obviously makes it more likely that it's a two quarterback race. They went through the spring game. And so I think at its heart, it's a two quarterback race. But I don't think that Mac Brown has closed the door on, if Jacoby Criswell shows up and has picked up on the playbook, has a grasp of things, and really looks the part, and either Max Johnson or Connor Harrell struggles, I don't think he's going to be willing to – I don't think he's going to shut off that door for him to go in there and compete for the job either. So I think it's more of – it's a two quarterback race, but if that door opens for Jacoby Criswell to play a factor, I think they're more than willing to let that be the case. I don't think it's a good thing, though, if it gets to that point for Carolina.
Yeah, I think it's three. I really do, because I think you look at the caliber of Jacoby Criswell, and they wouldn't have brought in somebody that they were that familiar with. I mean, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe they really did want someone that they were just comfortable with. But I mean, to me, nobody was able to really separate themselves in the spring. It's as close of a race as we've gotten. And I don't know if it's a move. I wouldn't say it's panicked, but I wonder if the staff is questioning whether these two guys are really what this offense needs. And maybe that's the reason that they brought in Criswell. I'm going to tell you, Criswell, even if it's the situation that you are laying out, Criswell believes that he has a chance to win this battle. So he's going to come in motivated. This is not a guy that's coming in thinking, okay, I'm coming in to just be the third string, maybe even the backup. I'm the dude that's coming in here to compete and try to finally win a starting job. And so, I mean, look, I wouldn't rule it out. I do think that, learning the playbook is something that is going to take a little bit of time, but he has had the summer, and this is a playbook that he said, when he first got back to Carolina, and he was talking, I think it was to Inside Carolina, and he said, look, Chip Lindsey recruited me. I know his system a little bit already. So I think that's the thing, is that if the system that he was in Arkansas was similar, which with KJ Jefferson, you could envision a similar type of system, then who knows? Maybe he's the guy that jumps in and finds a way to climb the ranks. How many should you be wanting to be involved? If you're a Tar Heel fan, you should only want two, because you should want a clear answer when this team takes the field at Minnesota. They need one quarterback. They cannot have two quarterbacks when they open the season, because if they do, and look, I think it'll be managed a lot differently than it was with Larry Fedora, but we saw it back in 2014 in an opener where they truly did not know who the starting quarterback was going to be because the quarterbacks were too close. They started both, they played both quarterbacks significant minutes in that game. They struggled to beat Liberty. Now, part of that was it was a poor defensive effort against Liberty, but there was never any rhythm to the game. The thing is, that was an opener in your own house against a then FCS Liberty team that during that time really wasn't that great. You're talking about a Minnesota team that under PJ Fleck has been consistently good. Last year was seen as a pretty down year for them, and they're hoping to return to the type of success that he's had. And they went out and made a lot of changes in order to do that. Yeah, they lose some things defensively. They're still going to be a really tough team. So, I mean, look, man, Carolina, to me, they've got to find that one guy, but that's asking a lot at this point with how many guys are in that room and where, with the mindset just seeming to be all over the place. Now, here's the ultimate question, and then we'll get to, what we project will happen. But who do you actually want to be the starter when it's all said and done? I would say both of us probably rule out Jacoby Criswell, because the thing is if it's Jacoby Criswell, it's Jacoby Criswell and another quarterback. I don't think either of us believes he has enough time to actually win the starting job outright. So who do you want between Max Johnson and Connor Harrell to be the guy?
I want it to be Connor Harrell, and I mean, I think I made that known leading up to the bowl game last year. It was good that Drake May decided not to play in the bowl game. It gave Harrell the chance to get all those reps. I even said it when they brought Max Johnson in through the portal, that I wanted Connor Harrell to be the guy, because I think at the core of what Chip Lindsey's offense is supposed to be, he's the best fit. Which, you look at what Carolina did offensively last year, and it was very explosive. They put up a lot of points, registered a lot of yards, but it was still like, yes, you had a Maureen Hampton that went crazy, but it was still, a lot of it was dependent on Drake May and the ability to push the football down the field. This is a run and first offense, and this is an offense that, if you look back at where Chip Lindsey has come from, they've been able to utilize a mobile quarterback as well, which Connor Harrell definitely fits the mold. And, Mac Brown's talked a lot about, we got to use our offense to help our defense. I think Carolina at its core and with this offense is, yes, you want to be explosive. You want to have big play potential. But this needs to be an offense that is more ball control and can run the ball when they want to and really just eat up clock and keep that defense on the sidelines as much as possible. That way they stay more fresh and you're really protecting them from themselves. And so I think Harrell is the most natural fit for all those things. I like his arm talent better than Max Johnson's. The only thing about Max Johnson is the track record doesn't lie. The guy knows how to protect the football. And I think that's why it's going to make it – I think that's why there's going to be a legitimate race there, because the guy just doesn't turn it over. We saw Harrell throw 2 picks in the bowl game. So I want Harrell to be the guy. I think he's the best fit for this offense, but it's clear he hasn't done enough so far with what they did in the bowl game in the offseason to be the clear-cut QB1 as we head into camp.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I don't know how much you really hold the bowl game against him with the 2 interceptions. Again, he was, got injured early in the game, was under a ton of pressure, and you just wonder if he doesn't end up tweaking whatever he tweaked in the lower leg. I would assume it was his ankle. Then you really do wonder what that game ends up actually looking like for him, because that compromised him. We saw how well he was running the football early. And then, once he was, limping around back there, first of all, wasn't able to escape some of the pressure that was coming and really didn't look comfortable being able to drive the ball down the field. Yes, I'm with you. I've said it the whole way as well. Connor Harrell is the guy that I want. No questions asked, because to me, the upside is there's so much more for him. You go back to the spring game, and what sucks is that most people weren't really able to see what was going on unless you were in the stadium. Maybe you got some of the notes that came out of it. He was clearly the better quarterback that day. He did a better job of driving the football down the field. He had the explosive plays with deep throws that just were not there for Max Johnson. And the thing was, it wasn't even that Max Johnson was missing these throws down the field. There weren't a whole lot of shots that he took down the field. Where Connor Harrell, no, that was consistent. He knows that This offense has been built on explosive plays. And then you talk about the mobility, and we saw it in that bowl game. That's what this offense has truly lacked from its quarterback the last few years. Yeah, you've had, I mean, you look at what Sam Howell did his final year at Carolina. It was amazing. But even that, I mean, you're talking about a guy in Connor Harrell that could be similar to what we saw from Marquise Williams in terms of just the sheer amount of production on the ground because he's that good of a runner. And to have that threat in the backfield combined with a guy that has a pretty strong arm and for the most part in that spring game looked pretty accurate and had some good moments in the bowl game as well, I think you would want that to be the guy that leads your group. But you're right. I think we've heard the staff bring it up multiple times with Max Johnson. He's been a starter at 2 schools in the SEC. That is something that the staff really seems to value, and I think a lot of Tar Heel fans should value as well. I'm just hoping that that's something that you value in a backup, and he's a guy that, look, if Connor Harrell gets banged up like he did in the bowl game, there is somebody that can come in like Max Johnson and take the reins and be able to lead you to victory. Ultimately, I'm hoping that's what the conclusion the staff comes to is that, yeah, we got 2 guys that can win games here, but we have a guy that has much more potential and gives this offense a chance to be more like what we've had under Sam and Drake in Connor Harrell than an offense that really is going to be conservative. I think the thing with Max Johnson, we've heard, well, yeah, he's mobile. He's not a guy that you can run the football with through him. He's a guy that can escape and find extra time. He's a guy that can run and pick up first downs when there's a lane, but he's not a guy that you're going to be running a ton of designed runs with. And I think that's something that Carolina could really use this year, especially when you got a beast like Amari and Hampton in the backfield. So, I mean, ultimately, though, the big question is, yeah, those are the guys that we want. Now, what do we think actually will happen at quarterback?
I think Max Johnson starts the opener and splits reps with Connor Harrell. That's what I think ultimately happens. That starting experience on the SEC, it's not a fluke. Like it's important. Like it matters. And I've talked how much I think week 1 plays a lot into how this season can go for Carolina. Like Carolina wins that game, the schedule sets up for them to win a couple, to really have a strong September, maybe even a strong start like what you saw last year where Carolina's 6-0 in the middle of October. You lose that game, you just don't really know. I mean, Matt Brown alluded to it last week at the media. He goes, part of the struggles with playing these types of games week 1 is for the teams that lose, they become unsure of themselves and they probably lose a game or 2 that they shouldn't lose, just trying to recoup from a big loss to open up the season. And so I think Max Johnson will be the guy that starts the game at Minnesota because of that experience. And there'll be a little bit more of a trust factor. I think that once you get into once they get into the game planning, I think they'll find out that Connor Harrell is their guy. I think he's the best fit for the offense. And so I think Chip Lindsey will enjoy calling more plays for him. So while I think Max Johnson starts the opener, I think when we conclude week 1, no matter it's a win or a loss, I think we'll know who our quarterback's going to be. And I think that guy will be Connor Harrell.
Yeah, I think Max Johnson ends up starting the opener as well. I think the experience is just too much for Connor Harrell to overcome. I don't think there'll be enough separation between the two. I'd love for Connor to really find a way to show the staff that he is the guy. And the thing that I would like to see as well, didn't mention it there, I want to see this decision be made about the same time that they made the decision on Sam Howell, which was 10 days out. Drake May was a little bit closer to the season, but I think that if they could find their quarterback, especially since we don't think that these guys, this group, has a guy that's as talented as Sam or Drake, more preparation time as the number one guy, more reps with the ones, then eventually more, game planning with that first team when they get into the week of the game. I think that would be extremely beneficial. I think Max Johnson, though, ends up starting. And I think, honestly, it's probably two quarterbacks that play in that opener. My hope is that early in the game, you figure out that one guy is better for this game than the other, even if that is Max Johnson. And it's, enough to carry Carolina to a victory. That's going to be one of those games where I think out of the gate, it's probably going to be pretty ugly because I don't think the quarterback play is going to be that great. I think it's going to be a lot on Amari and Hampton. The good news is that I don't think Minnesota's offense is going to be tremendous either. They're bringing in an FCS quarterback. So I don't think the bar has to be super high for the offense in that game. I think then you'll start to see as they go probably into that second game of the season against Charlotte, that's more than likely where they will have whoever is going to be their starting quarterback. And look, I think there's still a good chance it's Max Johnson. I think this staff really likes him. I think they brought him in for a reason. And one thing that I really hope they are not looking at, but they probably are because it's hard to ignore it, is his pedigree as Brad Johnson's son. That's something that, has mattered before when it's come to big name quarterbacks progressing. And they're hoping that maybe he can be similar to his dad. I think the ability to take care of the football is what this staff is going to value more than anything because they believe that Amari and Hampton can carry this team where they want to go. And so I think it'll be Max Johnson for the early part of the season. I think there's a chance, though, that as the season goes along, he could become ineffective and they will then probably go to Connor Harrell, which could allow the team, once they make that move, even if they're 4-2, 3-3, whatever, to generate, a little bit of momentum and close the season strong, which ultimately could be what they're hoping for. But I mean, look, at this point, I think anything is possible. There are a lot of people that believe Jacoby Criswell could be the guy. So we could be 100% wrong and we could be coming back on here middle of camp and talking about him as the guy that's really emerging. You look beyond those guys, you got one other scholarship quarterback on the roster, and that is Michael Merdinger. He looked really good in the spring game for a true freshman and a guy that came in ranked outside of the top 1,000. I think there is a load of potential there for him. The thing to me that I think you love to see, now you hate that it forced Tad Hudson to transfer. But the fact that he beat out Tad Hudson, a guy who was a 4-star prospect who had already been in the system for a year, that's a great sign. This dude is someone that I just think he, in high school, first high school that he was at, succeeded, got in a bad situation where, he ends up having to transfer, goes to a school in Cardinal Gibbons where he has to sit for a year. And I think that took him just off of everybody's recruiting radar. And then last year ends up going and thriving in some of the camps that they put on in the preseason. And once he was able to do that, you started to see his recruitment grow just a little. But Carolina was the team that really capitalized on it. This is a guy that I think could end up being a gem for Carolina if he ends up sticking it out. Now, the thing is that, of course, you got Bryce Baker coming in after him. But I do think this is a guy that, can build in this system and really become something. So how comforting for you is it that you hear a guy like this that beats out a 4-star prospect that was ahead of him and gives them at least something for the future there at quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important, right? Because, getting that position right really puts your program in the best position forward to be successful or not. And especially if you think that there's going to be a coaching change in the future, if you still have a guy at quarterback that could be maybe the next guy to really keep this program, above water, that's really important because you look at the recent streak of quarterback play. Yes, you have Howell. Yes, you have Drake May. Mitch Trubisky, for as much as he was a flop in the NFL, was a really, really good college quarterback. And then you look at Marquise Williams, arguably the most decorated quarterback in Carolina history. Like, there's a decade.
Conveniently leaving out the 2-year period in between where it was just a complete train wreck. But
that's what I'm pointing at is that Carolina had no answers after they had such stable quarterback play in Marquise and Trubisky. It was ultimately the undoing of Larry Fedora. Mm-hmm. It does look like that's going to be the case no matter if it's still Mac Brown coaching until he's 84 or the next guy that's coming in. And so, you gotta give Mac Brown and the staff's ability to keep the quarterback play and the recruiting in a really good spot. It's easy to capitalize when you're having guys go to the NFL every year, but when you've had the kind of shortcomings also, it's kind of hard to get some of those, to get legitimate quarterbacks that want to come play for. That hasn't been the issue. So I think, Carolina gets the answer this year. Hopefully that guy's Connor Harrell. But moving forward, Michael Merdinger, is a guy that could be maybe a diamond in the rough. And then if you can keep Bryce Baker committed to you, it looks like Carolina's quarterback play is positioned to stay among the best in the ACC for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Merdinger is a guy, comparing him to the guys that, were in between Mitch and Marquise. I mean, yeah, he's ranked similarly to what we saw in Nathan Elliott. But I think there's more there. With Nathan Elliott, Nathan Elliott was basically a track star that also played football.
Yeah.
And eventually became the starting quarterback because Chaz Surratt was incredibly injury prone and was frankly terrible at quarterback when he was in there, and eventually ends up, switching sides of the ball and going over to linebacker. So, yeah, I think Merdinger, the fact that you've got Bryce Baker, and it seems like from everything we've seen, he is staying committed to Carolina. I would be stunned if he goes anywhere else because there are already some big offers on the table for him. The only one that you would worry about is Alabama showed interest. They haven't offered. And look, even that's a little bit different because let's be honest, they're an unknown. We have no clue what that program is going to be. I know it's Bama, but we don't know if Kalen DeBoer is going to be able to have the type of success that Nick Saban had. And him recruiting you is a little bit different than Nick Saban. So this is a group, a staff that has produced some really good quarterbacks in their time. Mac Brown, the two quarterbacks that he has had are both guys that if things had worked out correctly, there was a way that Sam Howell could have probably ended up being a first-round pick. But that season just went completely downhill. Still, you're talking about two quarterbacks that were drafted in, the first 5 rounds of the draft. And one of them went number 3 overall. And by the way, is probably going to win the starting job in New England if he continues to play the way that he is so far in training camp. So you hang your hat on those two guys. I think, there is reason to believe that no matter who they have at quarterback, they will do a better job of developing whoever it is than Larry Fedora and the previous staff did with those. That one, I think, honestly, they lucked into Marquise, who was, I'm trying to think, I believe he was a late Butch Davis recruit. Maybe he was in Larry's first class. But even so, that was a guy that was in-state and turned out to be a monster. And then Mitch Trubisky was a high-rated quarterback that, it ended up developing into a pretty good player. But I think that was, it felt like that staff got a little more lucky than the previous staffs did, where these guys were, because of the work that they did on the recruiting trail. But, you look, especially with what you saw from Drake May, being having to switch systems last year and wasn't nearly as good as he was the year before. but still incredibly productive and was far from the reason why Carolina struggled. That's why I think there's a lot of reason to believe that moving forward, recruiting quarterbacks won't be an issue and developing them won't be an issue. You close out the room with 4 walk-on quarterbacks. The one that returns from last year is DJ Mazzoni. Actually, no, that's right. He is a true freshman, but he was with the team in the spring. And yes, if that name is familiar, he is the grandson of Noel Mazzoni. And then you have 3 other true freshmen walk-ons. You've got Ben Bastek, who comes out of Atlanta, Georgia. Andres Mayres Jr., who comes from Miami, Florida, and then an in-state guy in Hudson Wilhelm, who comes from Wilmington, North Carolina. Would not expect any of those guys to play significant minutes, but do hope that we see them at some point, or at least one of those guys at some point this year, because we are blowing somebody out by that much. All right, guys, a couple of closing notes for you here on the way out. As I mentioned earlier, the players do report or did report earlier today and will officially take the field tomorrow evening for the first practice of fall camp. And so we'll have you covered with all of that stuff on the website at heeltoughblog.com. And then podcast-wise, hoping to get on Michael Coe, a guy that we've been talking to. I think just started talking to him last year. We're hoping to do the same thing this year when it comes to camp and everything like that. If not, hopefully somebody else that is out there, we will be able to get them to join us here to give us a report on the first day of camp, which should be very exciting for this group as the hype around them. Look, it's lower than it's been in years past, but you're starting to see them generate a little bit of buzz as we get closer to the season. So a very interesting team for those of us who have been following them since Mac Brown has returned. Meanwhile, the Tar Heels on the 2025 trail, there are a couple of guys that have ended up going elsewhere. We mentioned Malik Clark on the last edition of the podcast. Well, now another guy from the state of South Carolina that the Tar Heels were in on for a while, felt like they were probably in good position, but really faded over the last month or so following official visits. Onis Konambani, the 4-star cornerback from Columbia, South Carolina, he narrowed down his decision to 2 schools. It'll be Florida State or Tennessee for him. More than likely, I would think he'll follow Malik Clark, who he is very close with, and head to Florida State. But again, Carolina out of the running for another big-name target that it looked like early on they were in good position with. I understand this is going to be a smaller class, but it feels like Carolina, I mean, there's a chance they could be done already. Now, one thing that was interesting is earlier this week on Friday, Carolina did offer a running back in the 2025 class, a guy currently unranked in Demon June Jr., out of Jacksonville High School in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Now, the Tar Heels have gone there a few times before, most notably recently with Tymier Brown, who did end up transferring out, but it's a school that they have been able to recruit out of before. With June, he's an unranked prospect. He's a guy that took official visits to Georgia Southern and East Carolina back in June, but this offer, I think, will change things dramatically for him. I think this is clearly the biggest offer that he's going to get. I don't think that any of the other in-state schools will even look at him, but it shows you that Carolina is motivated to get a running back in this class. They swung and missed with a lot of guys, guys they brought on campus during the month of June, Jabri Wallace-Coleman, which makes a lot of sense. Once Alvin Henderson ended up flipping from Auburn, it made sense that Penn State would end up going after him as an in-state guy, and they landed him. The one that I think Carolina really thought that they would be able to find a way to flip was Bo Walker, the running back out of the state of Georgia. But the Bulldogs clearly showing him that he's valued, and so he ends up staying committed there. And so Carolina has to dig deep to find their guy, and it looks like that could be Demon June Jr. And so we'll keep an eye on that. But honestly, that could be the end of the class for Carolina. There are a couple of other guys that are out there, mainly keeping an eye on the wide receiver spot with 4-star Shamarius Peterkin, who looks like he's probably heading to NC State, and then 3-star Evan Haynes out of the state of Georgia, who probably looks like he's going to end up heading to Colorado. So, the recruiting trail hasn't been very kind to Carolina this time around, and it's something that they're going to have to improve moving forward. And part of that's going to be they have to be able to compete NIL-wise, which I'm sure you'll be hearing a lot about as we go throughout this season and then again into next offseason. So, again, anything on the recruiting trail, we'll have you covered on that. And then, of course, want to direct you guys to the website for all of our in-depth position previews. Those will be finished tonight when I put up the special teams. Might be a late one. Probably will end up tweeting that one out early tomorrow. And then we'll have coverage of the first day of camp. I'll give you an article leading into that about the battles that we are going to be watching. Yes, the position we just talked about, quarterback, is definitely going to be on there. But there's also going to be a few other positions that are incredibly intriguing going into this fall camp. So don't miss any of that. Again, HeelToughBlog.com. Also, make sure you're checking out the website every single day for any updated offseason news around Carolina basketball. Things have settled down a little bit for right now, but it's really going to pick up as we move along. Again, most recent thing that we talked about both on the website and the podcast was the schedule being released. Make sure you go check out that article on the website. Carolina also in good standing with one of their top prospects, a 5-star in the 2025 class. So make sure you check out all of that stuff and keep checking it throughout the offseason. Again, every day, check it out, HeelToughBlog.com. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank Josh for hosting with me. Want to thank you guys for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.